Shalom, everyone. More bodies have been returned to Israel from Gaza, but still 6 bodies still remain to be returned. Hezbollah has sent an open letter to the U.S. and to Israel, essentially declaring war again on Israel. And New York City has elected an anti-Israel and anti-Jewish mayor. We'll have to see how that turns out. And there's also a growing anti-Israel faction within the Republican Party. Messianic World Update begins now. Shalom, everyone. I'm Monte Judah with Lion and Lamb Ministries. Welcome to another edition of Messianic World Update. Today's date is Friday, November 7th of the year 2025. Here's the news for the week. Hamas did turn over some additional bodies this week. They're now down to the point where we only have 6 bodies still to remain that are remaining in Gaza that need to be returned. These particular bodies are primarily IDF soldiers who were taken October 7th, but there are some others, including a Joshua Molel, a Tanzanian agricultural student who was the latest body returned. He was murdered October 7th. As I said, 6 bodies still remain, and the returning live hostages are now beginning to share some testimonies of their captivity, including such things as sexual humiliation. We're talking about men now, trying to force conversions to Islam, starvation, being caged like animals, being beaten repeatedly over and over again. Obviously, Hamas is still playing games with this ceasefire, and by slowly returning the bodies. I don't understand quite what the game is, but they are refusing to cooperate fully and completely with the ceasefire agreement. Obviously, they're trying to establish a stabilization force. This is the U.S. And their headquarters, they've set at Kiryat Gat, to go into Hamas and stabilize the situation. However, the only countries that really stepped up to volunteer are Egypt, Turkey, and Qatar. Turkey and Qatar are not well thought of by Israel because they're past supporters of Hamas. Egypt a little bit differently, but right now that stabilization force is not really well established, and they're not quite sure what's going to happen. The U.S. may be in this situation trying to force fit this ceasefire to go forward. Israel is being very cautious because clearly their goal is to not allow Gaza to become a launching pad for terrorist activity against Israel, and the U.S. may be willing to cut a few corners to be able to get things to moving forward. And of course, at the heart of that is Hamas, whether that they remain and whether or not they're disarmed. How exactly they're going to disarm Hamas is still a question that nobody seems to have the answer. Hamas certainly is not cooperating with the idea of disarming at all. Meanwhile, in Lebanon, Hezbollah has just issued a letter this week to all world leaders with 4 basic points. No, they're not going to disarm, and no, there will be no direct negotiations with Israel. And they have totally rejected the U.S. ultimatum to disarm, and they are ready to reignite the war with Israel. So they're getting ready to fight Israel, and Israel is now on alert on their northern border to get ready for Hezbollah again. Israel, meanwhile, is dropping bunker busters on Hezbollah targets. They have a big tunnel network where they keep their supplies and their equipment. Obviously, Israel is trying to take as much of that out as they possibly can. If you recall, the Lebanese army was tasked with the idea of disarming Hezbollah, but if you look at the sheer numbers between the Lebanese army and Hezbollah, Hezbollah outnumbers the Lebanese army, so the Lebanese army is not really a solution for removing or disarming Hezbollah. Some good news, though, out of Israel with regard to dealing with terrorists. The terrorist elements that were operating in Judea and Samaria have apparently been dismantled. Israel has put an intensive effort into that, and they've stopped the arms that were flowing in from Syria and other Arab nations sympathetic to those terrorists that were in the West Bank, Samaria, and Judea areas. Netanyahu is also trying to work with the religious parties to come up with some kind of a partial exemption bill after the Haredi did the massive protests in and around Jerusalem. And obviously, Netanyahu would like to maintain the religious party's support for his coalition government. And as to how that's all going to work out, we're just not quite sure, but it's going to be some kind of compromise. And we'll just have to get more details on that later on. But Netanyahu has finally spoken up and said that he's going to try to work toward a compromise. In New York City, we had the election this week for the mayor, and Zohran Mamdani was elected the new mayor, and he takes office January 1. And if you've been following any of the American news here and international news about this, he obviously supports a pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel position. Mind you, New York City is filled with many Jewish people. And aside from his socialistic and communistic positions, he's a Marxist. And how that's supposed to work within the structure of the U.S. economy, we're not quite sure. He's extreme far left, and some of these elements appear to be taking over the Democratic Party. In fact, many of the Democratic leaders are hesitant to take issue with him. There's a move within the Democratic Party, and the question is, how pervasive will it be? Will it expand from New York City out into other places, other states, other cities? The real question in New York, and for coming up in the next year or so, what will be the impact on the Jewish people that live there in New York City and in those cities? Israel would love to have them immigrate to the land of Israel, but New York City is kind of like ancient Babylon to the Jews. And in the story of ancient Babylon, some of the remnant of Judah did return to the land, but many remained in Babylon because of their businesses and their homes that they had. And they believe the same kind of thing would happen. There would not be a massive Jewish exodus out of New York. Many will stay, and maybe to their harm. There's also a question on this win as to will it impact other cities, other major cities here in the United States. And there's apprehension on the part of the Democrats and many communities that it could expand what this Mamdani is doing. It could expand to other cities, not just New York City. To go along with this, there is a growing anti-Israel set of voices in the Republican Party. Now, it's one thing to have half the Democrats being anti-Israel. It's a whole nother thing for there to be a faction within the Republican Party. For the most part, they've been very supportive of Israel. But here just recently, Tucker Carlson, who's a well-established conservative voice from a Republican point of view, held an interview recently with a gentleman by the name of Nick Fuentes. And Nick Fuentes is a raging anti-Jewish, anti-Israel Holocaust denier. And he got on this interview with Tucker Carlson talking about his opinions of Israel. And here's Nick Fuentes in his own words, so you can understand who he is all about.
I've said on the show also is the idea that neoconservatism and Israel has nothing to do with Jewishness, Jewish identity, the Jewish religion, because clearly the state of Israel and the neocons are deeply motivated by that ethnic identity, and their allegiance to Israel proceeds from that. You know, the plan of Greater Israel, the blood and soil nationalism of Israel, it stems from this ethno-religion, which is Judaism.
Is, just BLM, the new version. This is identity politics. They're engaging in identity politics. I mean, that's just so obvious to me. Yeah, that's a lot of it for sure. But then, how do you explain Mike Huckabee, Ted Cruz, and there are a lot like that, John Bolton. I mean, I've known them all, George W. Bush, Karl Rove. I mean, all people I know personally who I've seen be seized by this brain virus, and they're not Jewish. Most of them are self-described Christians, and then the Christian Zionists who are, Christian Zionists. What is that?
Right.
And I can just say for myself, I dislike them more than anybody.
And I absolutely agree with you. I would say, though, that the main challenge to that, a big challenge to that, is organized Jewry in America.
The Heritage Foundation, which is a very conservative organization, the leader of that organization came out and tried to defend Tucker Carlson for what he had done. He's now suffering a big backlash because the Heritage Foundation used to have a project, I think it was called Project Esther, they've been doing for the last 2 years, trying to stem the tide against anti-Israel, anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic activities. As a result of them not taking Tucker Carlson to issue, several members of the Heritage Foundation that have been involved in that project are now resigning because they believe that the Heritage Foundation has completely compromised their position as to being against anti-Semitism and against anti-Israel kinds of activities.
There was a major development yesterday regarding the growing feud on the political right over Tucker Carlson's interview with Nick Fuentes. Now, Kevin Roberts, president of the Heritage Foundation, who initially had defended Carlson and said that Heritage as an organization would never cancel him, has now apologized at great length to his entire staff. Roberts appeared at an all-staff meeting and offered an apology. That was yesterday. He then went on to take questions for 2 hours from staff members, some of whom thanked him and said that they still back him, while others trashed him and said he should resign. That meeting was recorded, and it was shared with the Washington Free Beacon, a conservative news outlet. Here was Roberts' apology.
I made a mistake, and I let you down. And I let down this institution. And I am sorry for that. Period. Full stop. And what I want to do, without making excuses for anything, is explain to you the purpose of and the process by which we posted the video.
Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes are not the only voices that are starting to speak against Israel, not supporting Israel, anti-Jewish thought. I'm not going to go through a big list of them, but I can tell you this. Within those circles, the J.D. Vance apparently is circulating in the same circles, and that's causing a lot of concern on the part of the future Republican Party after Trump. Will they be as strongly as in support of Israel? Listen here as Vice President Vance, at a recent Turning Point event, give answer to U.S. involvement with Israel in now and into the future. And you will hear him basically hedge a little bit about helping Israel the way the U.S. has been helping Israel in the past.
When the President of the United States says America first, that means that he pursues the interests of Americans first. That is our entire foreign policy. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to have alliances, that you're not going to work with other countries from time to time, and that is what the president believes, is that Israel, sometimes they have similar interests to the United States and we're going to work with them in that case. Sometimes they don't have similar interests to the United States. And this example, the most recent Gaza peace plan that all of us have been working on very hard for the past few weeks, the president of the United States could only get that peace deal done by actually being willing to apply leverage to the state of Israel. So when people say that Israel is somehow manipulating or controlling the President of the United States, they're not controlling this President of the United States, which is one of the reasons why we'd be able to have some of the success that we've had in the Middle East.
There is a illustration, kind of a word picture that is being used to describe what's going on with the Democrats as well as with the Republicans when it comes to this issue of being anti-Semitic and anti-Israel. They refer to it as the horseshoe illustration. A horseshoe is a bent and the points of it come down close together. If you've ever looked at a horseshoe, at the far points of a horseshoe, it's actually closer together there than it is just being on the sides. And the observation is being made that the extreme left is anti-Israel and the extreme right of Israel is anti-Israel, and they're coming together like the points of a horseshoe. And there's less separation between those two positions, but one very conservative, one very liberal. But over the issue of Israel, they're agreed. And so there's concern growing that just being conservative is no longer enough when it comes to dealing with Israel. The extreme far right apparently is joining forces with the extreme far left when it comes to their disagreement with Israel. I want to ask you to continue to pray for Israel, for what's going on there, for the impending harm that's going to take place with Hezbollah. Pray for the remaining bodies to return. Pray for the people of Israel as they grieve all of the bodies that are returning, those that they have lost. Almost every family in Israel has been touched by this. Pray for us here at Lion and Lamb Ministries as we continue on. Please like, subscribe, and comment on our YouTube channel. And if you'd like to watch our other programs without commercials, sign up for a free account with lionandlamb.tv. All of our weekly programs are available on podcasts, so you can listen wherever you go. We also offer a free subscription to Yavo. Here is the latest Yavo magazine for November. Excellent article by Eddie Chumney about the Melchizedek Messiah. And by the way, a quick personal update on Eddie. He had heart surgery this week. He's out of surgery. He's recovering well. Please pray for his speedy recovery. And he's going to kind of be out of commission for a couple of months here. So pray for his speedy return. Shabbat Shalom to all of you.